Under the surface of recent silence, a strange preparation is taking place. Something isn't quite normal about these final days of May, though the calendar insists otherwise. Conversations seem hollow, crowds feel distant, and even familiar spaces carry an unfamiliar weight. It's not exhaustion, it's not apathy, it's a tuning down of external volume so something internal can rise. Something quiet, yet immensely precise. Not all shifts arrive like thunder. Some rearrange the internal compass in ways that only solitude can detect. And if it feels like stepping back is the only way to move forward, maybe the mind has finally stopped chasing and started receiving. Strange, isn't it, how absence can reveal more than presence? When distraction falls away, clarity doesn't rush in. It waits, still and electric, just beyond the clutter. These aren't just quiet days, they're calibrations. Being near chaotic energy right now is like trying to hear a whisper during a storm. Thoughts become static, emotions scatter, perception distorts. What enters during this window isn't loud. It's subtle, intricate, and easily missed. There's something forming not through logic or noise, but through resonance. Can something be real before it's seen? Can a message arrive before it's spoken? Maybe it already has, and only silence was sensitive enough to feel it. Strange how isolation can feel less like a condition and more like an initiation, as if something out there is matching its pace to a rhythm unfolding inside. That sense of distance. What if it's not detachment, but protection? Not everyone is meant to witness what's coming through right now. There's a refinement in play, and only clear frequencies are allowed through the gate. Ever noticed how some realizations require loneliness to fully land? What if this moment is less about pulling away from others and more about aligning with something that doesn't speak in words, but understands everything? And yet something waits on the horizon, wrapped in the ordinary disguise of a calendar date, May 30th. It won't announce itself with fanfare, no prophecy, no warning siren, but it will arrive with a weight that changes perception. Not by what it shows, but by what it shifts in how things are seen. Some won't notice. Others will feel the shape of something unexplainable sliding into view. Like the world turns the same, but it lands differently. And who will catch that moment for what it truly is? Not those looking outward, but those who have already begun listening inward. What's coming next might just be the missing piece you didn't know you were looking for. Hit subscribe because the next message wasn't meant to be missed. Patterns don't reveal themselves in noise. They echo in sequence. And something is unfolding just beneath what's been dismissed as coincidence. This isn't intuition, it's design. Not dramatic, not symbolic. Real, functional. What moves next won't whisper in dreams or flicker in omens. It will arrive as action, as moment, as event. Life will speak in rearrangement, and it will make no effort to explain itself. But make no mistake, when June comes, the shift won't need to be believed. It will simply be undeniable. Something isn't ending. It's simply quieting down, just enough for something finer to emerge. Like the air before a tuning fork hums, there's a precision to this pause that isn't meant to be filled, only felt. The impulse to decode everything right now will only jam the frequency. The task isn't decoding, it's becoming receptive. Stillness has a signature, and some signals only arrive in silence. What if the question doesn't matter? Because the answer is already coming, and the only thing left is whether it's heard. Pause here. How much of what's been happening lately feels like noise? And how much feels like a pattern trying to shape itself? These 3 days aren't random dates on a linear timeline. They're like nested spheres, a rotating vault, not a finish line. Each passage has a tone, a motion, a resonance. Think of them less like a countdown and more like musical notes, distinct but harmonic. Rushing through them is like skipping a heartbeat and pretending it doesn't throw off the entire rhythm. The design isn't obvious unless attention becomes the currency. Each segment introduces a dimension that the next one builds on. And if something clicks, if even one internal doorway creaks open, it stays open. That's the difference between change that fades and transformation that integrates. The first gate thinks, but not in the way thoughts usually come and go. It's a circuitry recalibration, a moment when ideas feel too sharp or too soft, like they don't quite fit inside their usual frames. And it's not about correcting these thoughts, but tracing them, like watching a spark travel along a wire. What's recurring isn't just repetition, it's trying to be seen. Themes resurface not to haunt, but to highlight. What draws the mind over and over again isn't a distraction. It's a mirror waiting for a deeper glance. Has there been a strange loop in thinking lately? Noticing it is part of the untangling. The gate opens when watching becomes more important than reacting. The second passage isn't about thought at all. It's cellular. A strange tiredness or a wild charge may hit out of nowhere, and neither will be wrong. Bodies interpret cosmic weather before words can. One moment it's a rush, the next it's a collapse. This is physiology as messenger, not obstacle. Sensations become syntax. If the vessel feels off, that's not dysfunction. It's instruction. The day isn't about pushing through, it's about attunement. The spine knows when to stretch and when to fold, and sleep might not be laziness, but decoding in disguise. What has the body been whispering lately? Through tension, through appetite, through breath? The final space won't knock. It doesn't arrive with flashes or formulas. It's more like light bending into a room after a long cloud cover. Subtle but unmistakable. This isn't where words work. It's the realm where stillness is the only language left. If the earlier 2 days were a setup, this is the synthesis. What enters here doesn't always make sense, but something rearranges. It's not just clarity, it's closure. Not the shutting of a door, but the sealing of something old. That's why this time demands distance, not from others as rejection, but as preservation. Have there been signals lately that don't need decoding, only space to land? These last flickers of May aren't just passing moments on a clock. They're movements within a larger choreography, a triad of steps, each requiring full presence to complete. Not every experience gathered in solitude is meant to be lifted into the spotlight. Some things arrive half-formed, not because they're unclear, but because they're still alive. Raw data doesn't need applause. It needs space. And what lands during this stretch might not make sense immediately, and that's not a flaw. It's part of the structure. Ever noticed how some understandings arrive wordlessly? Like a ripple before the stone even hits the water? Revelations have a way of testing their host before they allow themselves to be translated. And if certain insights arrive quietly, that's on purpose. Pushing them into speech too soon often scrambles their pattern. Some messages don't want to be interpreted. They want to settle. Letting a realization breathe inside the body, letting it fold into dreams, alter routines, shift focus without explanation, that's where the real translation happens. It's like a new sound tuning the bones before the ear can register it. And isn't it strange how often meaning arises, not from articulation, but from quiet alignment? If you understood even part of this, it means the signal is reaching you. Subscribe. The rest will make sense soon enough. There's a strange pressure these days to display inner growth like it's some kind of portfolio. Proof of depth, validation of clarity. But not every insight is meant to be performed. Some are still in cocoon phase, and dragging them into the open turns transformation into performance. This isn't the season of announcements, it's the season of conservation. Silence isn't the absence of connection, it's a safeguard. The old impulse to share too soon, to narrate in real time, that's the very thing this period asks to pause. What if the most powerful wisdom doesn't come out through speech, but shows up in who someone becomes, long after the words have faded? And so the days ahead aren't asking for declarations, they're requesting containment, because something unseen is calibrating and too much external noise could fracture its shape. Ever wonder why certain dreams linger while others evaporate on waking? There's a reason for that. Some frequencies imprint because they're meant to build something inside before they move outward. And when June arrives with its own tempo, the question will be simple. Did the silence reshape anything? Or was it just filled with noise in a different voice? When the internal world starts speaking during rare alignments, it doesn't do so for entertainment. It delivers instruction. This isn't the usual drift of dream space, where things bend loosely and dissolve by breakfast. Something shifts between May 29th and 31st, pulling the subtle realm into a stricter alignment. Inner visions take on the density of memory, Not because they become more vivid, but because they land with intention. Some impressions carry the weight of having been designed. It isn't about fantasy, it's about broadcast. Ever woken up mid-thought, like a dialogue was already in motion before consciousness returned? It's not unusual in these moments to rise with words in the mouth that weren't spoken, or names surfacing that haven't been uttered in years. Faces appear that never belonged to personal memory, yet feel unmistakably relevant. Some wake up feeling like they didn't rest at all, as if the night had assignments rather than dreams. That's not exhaustion, that's evidence. Something was received, and it's not meant to be unraveled with logic. This isn't a crossword, it's a carrier wave. What arrives now isn't requesting analysis, it's leaving an imprint. Let the message live first, and don't panic if it hasn't yet told its full story. It's not behind schedule, it's arriving ahead of time. Not every internal scene demands clarity. Some arrive not to explain, but to embed. Repeating sequences, altered slightly each time, are not glitches, they're calibrations. That scene that resurfaces with one new detail, that's not a mistake. That's the system repeating the message until it's finally absorbed. Others may only receive flashes, a gesture, a place, a moment. And that's not insufficient. It's architectural. The blueprint is being drawn in increments. So many assume revelation must be whole, but what if it's scaffolding first? What if the shape is only visible in hindsight? Even when nothing appears in sleep, the messages may simply have crossed over. The boundary between the night world and the day world thins in these windows. Subtle traces can show up in the most mundane settings, an eerie knowing in a routine moment, a scene unfolding exactly as seen before, a reaction that feels scripted from somewhere else. That's not confusion. That's data leaking through. The question isn't whether something is speaking, but whether it's being overheard, and if any part of recent reality has felt borrowed from another timeline. Has it occurred that maybe it was? Some thoughts don't originate internally. They pass through almost like forgotten signals looking for somewhere to land. And lately there's a certain type that loops, not in chaos but in precision. The same name, the same moment, the same version of an unlived future returns again and again. It doesn't demand anything, it just reappears. Not all repetition is dysfunction. Sometimes it's magnetism. As this season draws to a close, attention is being pulled toward the fragments that never properly anchored. Strange how even fleeting images can feel like coordinates, pulling consciousness toward a long overdue alignment. This isn't regression, it's recursion. The loop means something's finally moving. What was once dismissed or misunderstood is now circling back because the internal lens has changed. Certain thoughts don't return to haunt, they return to complete. What was once fragmented is now being drawn back for synthesis. The nervous system may not recognize it as progress, but the deeper layers do. There's a design to what replays. And what if that design isn't about correction, but completion? Not because something was wrong before, but because it couldn't be translated until now. A recurring pull toward an old desire, a long-lost idea, or an unexplained interest isn't distraction. It's memory in motion. And swatting it away too quickly may cut off something vital. These persistent impressions aren't asking for solutions, they're requesting presence. Curiosity can be more honest than certainty. The version of self that once imagined more, tried more, dreamed differently, that version isn't outdated. Maybe it's returning not as nostalgia, but as instruction. What's circling now may not belong to the past at all. It may be a preview, disguised as déjà vu. So instead of evaluating thought like a problem to fix, what happens when it's observed as a trail to follow? It's easy to pathologize repetition, but repetition is how systems realign. Every return might carry something new within it, even if the surface looks the same. This window is a corridor where old frequencies resurface, not for analysis, but for reintegration. And if something keeps tugging at attention lately, without warning, without logic, it might be the future checking in early. Does that sound too strange or strangely familiar? Still thinking about what you just heard? That's not an accident. Subscribe. Let what's waking up in you keep unfolding. When time thins, space flexes. There have always been moments tucked between the rhythms of calendars, intervals that don't belong to the usual pattern. Some systems once acknowledged them without fully explaining them. They weren't feared as much as respected. These in-between days didn't operate by the rules of sequence. They drifted just outside the visible weave. And strangely, something about this particular stretch, this closing thread of May, mirrors that same feeling. It's as if everything is functioning, but without friction. Actions happen, clocks move, but presence feels detached, like watching from underwater. Ever felt like reality temporarily forgets to hold its shape? There's a softness here that doesn't feel like rest, but like a reset. Time folds in on itself, not in speed, but in density. Movement exists without consequence, and moments blur not from fatigue, but from a lack of anchoring. Some days leave a footprint. These feel more like condensation, appearing and disappearing without certainty. In older frameworks, such pockets weren't ignored. They were honored, because during them, something beneath the surface loosens. Structure relaxes, boundaries thin. These aren't moments to be feared, but they aren't meant to be filled either. There's meaning in their openness, like doorways that don't open until no one's watching. Certain phenomena only become audible when everything else turns down. In these hollow zones, sensory input may dull, but internal signal sharpens. Stillness becomes a conduit. Intuition doesn't just whisper, it hums. Something else begins to pay attention back. Not spirits in the traditional sense, but the intelligence of presence. Awareness, once diffused, becomes focal. There's a reason stillness has always been a requirement for inner work, not just to hear, but to be heard. And here, in this narrow slip of time, that hearing becomes easier. Not because the veil lifts, but because noise finally recedes. Those with ancient clocks knew, don't overfill these days. Don't assume they're filler. They aren't breaks, they're bridges. And bridges aren't meant to be lived on. They're meant to be crossed with care. During these intervals, things previously dormant begin to stir. Not because they were absent, but because access becomes easier when resistance fades. Ideas return, sensations sharpen, and sometimes memory from the body, not the mind, surfaces. That's not imagination, that's timing. And in these rare cycles, silence becomes a kind of key. So the real question becomes, what has silence been trying to open that noise always covered? As the final stretch of May unfolds like a skin-shedding time itself, strange images may begin to surface from places that don't seem to belong anywhere in memory. A hallway that feels familiar but leads nowhere on any map. A bench beneath a tree that never grew in this life. A building remembered by the body but absent from history. These aren't hallucinations. They are activations, signals rising through unseen layers of the psyche. And what they point to isn't illusion, but infrastructure. What if some spaces were never built outside, but have always existed internally, waiting for recognition? These places aren't created, they're remembered. They form part of an inner ecosystem most rarely accessed. Remnants of ancestral memory, unprocessed chapters of the soul, or blueprints drawn before physical form took over the script. Everyone walks through life carrying a private archive. But under the weight of routine, those quiet rooms stay sealed. In this current stretch, where energy feels condensed and time feels oddly stretched, those old passageways flicker back to life, and something within starts listening. When silence deepens, forgotten coordinates begin to pulse again. Experience does not always require external proof. The locations emerging in altered states, a door made of sound, a room with no ceiling, a shoreline curving back into itself, aren't symbolic in the conventional sense. They are not puzzles, they are impressions, and they don't ask to be solved, only walk through. Thinking too hard is the surest way to miss what's arriving. These aren't errors in perception, they're intentional placements. If something strange shows up in consciousness now, maybe it's because it's always been there, just waiting for the noise to stop long enough to speak. There is a hidden design etched underneath ordinary perception, one that doesn't announce itself but waits patiently for stillness. Some will feel it as a soft urgency to pause. others as a vivid recollection of something never physically lived. But all of it is navigation. These blueprints do not update through conversation or distraction. They calibrate in presence. The body remembers before the mind does. And stillness, when properly entered, becomes a key. Not every part of the soul speaks in words. Some parts speak in imagery. Some only open when no one else is watching. So if a vision surfaces, half dream, half déjà vu, follow it without trying to force meaning from it. The unfamiliar places that rise now may be more intimate than anything recognized before. Some memories don't come from this life, yet they belong fully to the self. If a room appears inside that's never been seen before, but feels unmistakably lived in, consider that it might not be new. It might be returning. And once it opens, its door may never fully close again. Some absences aren't defined by what disappeared, but by what's about to step in. There are moments when the atmosphere bends, where it feels like someone should be there, even though no one ever was. Everything looks ordinary, yet something feels spatially off. Not in a haunting way, but as if an outline has formed in thin air. The sensation carries weight, like the fabric of the moment is making room for something intangible. And it's not emptiness from lack. It's the kind of absence that anticipates a presence still on its way in. This phenomenon isn't just about longing or nostalgia, it's preparation. The psyche, when nearing energetic threshold shifts, begins to widen its field of reception. There's a clearing out that happens, not due to grief, but due to readiness. That strange vacancy isn't always mourning someone lost. It's sometimes the arrival signal of a version of self not yet embodied. There are fragments of potential orbiting the mind, waiting for permission to land. And for them to enter, the space must be unoccupied, not by people, but by expectation. You're not here by mistake. If this felt like home, it probably is. Subscribe and stay where the deeper truths live. These next few days will hold a stillness that might feel uneasy at first. But that emptiness isn't calling to be fixed. It's inviting attention. It's not a void, it's a framework. Not absence, but scaffolding. Something's taking shape through the pause. A new rhythm, a revised internal structure, or a part of the soul preparing to return from a long drift. It won't arrive through noise, and it won't appear under pressure. The more one tries to force understanding, the more it slips away. Let it stay unspoken just for now. And there's a kind of paradox here. The very thing this space is forming for can only enter if it's not overshadowed by anticipation. If filled prematurely with activity or explanation, it may retreat. The mind might label this sensation as isolation or weird quiet, but it's not that. It's spiritual architecture being drafted in real time. When something feels near but undefined, that isn't confusion. That's alignment. Some things don't knock. They wait until the room is ready. These final days of May aren't casual. They're cues. The disconnection, the hesitance to speak, the unusual stillness. It's not dysfunction. It's a checklist. Every moment of withdrawal is a marker. And what if this isn't about reflecting on what happened, but syncing up with what's next? That strange urge to turn down the volume, to cancel plans, to notice patterns tightening. Isn't that choreography, not chaos? June doesn't enter softly. It carries motion, rapid sequence, revelation. It doesn't pause to explain. It just reveals. And those not tuned will miss its timing, not by days, but by microseconds. This isn't warning, it's calibration. There's no need to rehearse perfection, only presence. But presence isn't passive, it listens with the full body. That's why the silence matters. It's where the alignment happens. Preparation is often misunderstood. The work isn't in the spotlight, it's in the pauses before the light hits. That's what these days are. If skipped, everything still unfolds, but it may feel like reality is half a measure ahead. The moments don't wait, they pass, and missing them isn't dramatic, it's quiet, which is why this time is sacred, not dramatic, not loud, but vital. What would it look like to meet June, not as a bystander, but as someone already in position? If this message found its way to you and you're still here, thank you for holding space with me. If the content resonated, feel free to subscribe, and stay connected as more reflections unfold. Your presence here genuinely matters. And if anything stirred within, an insight, a feeling, a memory, drop it in the comments. Sometimes one sentence from someone else becomes the exact signal someone else needed. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and if it feels aligned, subscribe to keep journeying deeper with us.